Hi, this is Cynthia from Kiwi Urban Homestead. Today I'm getting ready to plant out my seed potatoes. The good news is that there's no sign of the dog having a go at any of the barrels with the blood mixture in them, so I've uncovered them. And now I've got laid out on this table my various seed potatoes. We have Rocket, Swift, Jersey Benny, Elam Hardy and some Agria. Now I'm going to be putting them in the barrels in the order of how fast they mature, starting at this end with the fastest maturing ones, going to the far end with the longer maturing ones. I've created a bit of a chart here with the labels off the seed potato bags and also a list of how many days approximately to maturity. And where you see I've written B1, B2, etc., that means barrel 1, barrel 2 and so forth. So what I'm going to be doing now is weighing the exact weight of the seed potatoes going into each barrel so I can do an accurate comparison of how much I get to harvest compared to how much I planted. So I'm going to use my trusty kitchen scale, just zero it, and we'll start with some Rocket. The weather is starting to get a bit windy, but I'm wanting to get these in, so I apologise if we're getting a bit of wind noise on the microphone. So here's some Rocket potatoes. As you can see, they've been chitted or sprouted. Not sure if that's in focus. And I'm going to put 5 or perhaps 6 in each barrel. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Try not to break the sprouts. 6. And the total weight of that is 462 grams. So I'll just write that down, 462 grams. And that's for barrel 1. So now I'll just lay those out in the barrel. Evenly spacing them around. There we go. And next I'll be covering those with probably 2 inches of compost and a couple of inches of wood chip as well. So now I'm going to go ahead and repeat exactly what I just did, weighing, recording and setting out the seed potatoes into each barrel. As you can see, if you look at this seed potato, there's little shoots on the top of it. Potatoes do kind of have a right way up, so the idea is to plant them with these little green shoots pointing upwards as if they're heading for the soil surface rather than doing this, which would make the plant work a lot harder to correct itself. Though if you do get them up the wrong way, particularly if you've not sprouted them this much, then that's okay, they will still do just fine. These have been sitting in the greenhouse, sitting in these trays in a light situation since August, and it's now October, so that's 2 months. If you put them in the dark, they develop long, skinny white shoots, and those shoots are very fragile and will break off easily when you plant them and bury them, which you don't want. So these short green shoots are better because they've got the potatoes started, but they're not so fragile. Let's talk for a minute about the return one might expect to get from each seed potato that you plant. This is a single Swift seed potato, and as you can see, it weighs just over 100 grams. A 5 to 8 times return in weight is considered to be pretty good. 10 times is very good. Some people claim quite a bit more, but more experienced growers tend to scoff at the notion of getting, say, 100 times as much back. So I'm going to be reasonably optimistic and hope that I get 10 times what I planted back. That would mean this one 100 gram potato, after it's planted and grown, might yield about 1 kilo of potatoes in return. As you can see, the total weight planted in each drum varies quite a bit because some of the seed potatoes are bigger than others, though there's 6 of them planted in each drum. But on average they weigh a total of around 500 grams in each drum, which means, all going well, I should get about 5 kilos of potatoes back for each one of these drums. And if it goes very well, I might even get more. But time will tell what it is. As you can see, I've got some seed potatoes left over after putting 6 in each barrel, so what to do with the rest of them? Well, I have got some planter bags that I brought last year from the warehouse for $5 each, potato planters, and I'm going to experiment with those as well, and I'm going to plant 2 seed potatoes, one variety in each of the 4 bags I have. I've only got 1 swift potato left, so I'm not going to include that in this particular experiment, but I'll be planting 2 of each of the other varieties in these planter bags. In preparation for that, I've used a wheelbarrow and loaded it up and mixed in it exactly the same mixture as I put in the barrels. So that's compost, sheep manure, grass clippings, sulfate of potash, eggshell, milk powder and rock dust. The only difference is that I don't have any more blood liquid, so that'll be the only thing that they're not getting. But I'm going to go ahead and shovel some of this into these planter bags and set up 2 seed potatoes, which again I will weigh and record. These planter bags have 3 drainage holes in the bottom. I'm not sure if that's enough, and they also have a flap on the side. I can do this with one hand. That's velcroed down. Sorry. So that you can open this up and bandicoot young potatoes around from underneath the plants without digging the whole thing up. So they'll be quite interesting to use. Okay, so the difference with these potatoes in the planter bags is that they're in planter bags. Also, instead of putting more fresh compost on top of the soil that's got all the goodies mixed into it, I'm just planting them directly on top of it. And the third difference is that, of course, I'm not using the blood mixture. So it'll be interesting to see how these compare in the final harvest. Once again, I'm just going to cover them with some compost. And then I'll be adding some wood chip on top of that. I've stepped out of the wind and into the greenhouse for a minute so that I can show you how I'm recording the details and information I collect as I'm growing these potatoes. In order to keep my pieces of paper together, I've put them in a clear file. And this raw data that I wrote down as I was weighing and planting the potatoes has now been incorporated into some data sheets that I've created. I have 1 data sheet for each barrel or planter, or for each variety of potatoes, and on it I'm recording the variety planted, whether it was certified or whether it was chitted, whole or cut potatoes that are planted, where it was planted, when it was planted, and also other information such as what it's grown in and what's been added to it. And there'll be more data added as I go on with the growing and the harvesting. Because this particular ones, these planter barrels, there's so many done the same way, instead of writing down what I've added to it over and over again, I've created 1 sheet with all that information on it that I can refer back to. Looking at the costs involved in growing potatoes in my planter bags and barrels, I won't read all these details out in order to keep this video under 15 minutes, but you can pause it for a closer look. Bottom line is, if I get a 10-to-1 return, I should get about 55 kilos of potatoes, which will cost $1.91 per kilo to grow this way. If I top up with compost as they're growing, it'll cost a wee bit more. If it's just done with wood chip, there'll be almost no additional cost. Now this is of course more expensive than buying cheap potatoes from the supermarket, but a lot less expensive than buying organic potatoes, and there's several good reasons why we really should only eat organic potatoes, which I won't go into, but you can look up. However, there are of course other ways to grow potatoes that might cost more or less, and let's go and have a look at a few other ways I'm going to do them for this particular experiment. I've still got some seed potatoes left over, so I'm going to do a couple more experiments. In this one here, I have a 2 metre by 1 metre garden bed frame. I've just laid down on top of the rotted down sawdust and manure, horse manure that was put here last year. And in it I'm digging some shallow trenches. In the bottom of the trench I'm sprinkling some gypsum and rock solid and some sheep pellets, and then just laying out the seed potatoes about 30 centimetres apart. And in this bed there'll probably be 3 rows of seed potatoes. And then I'm going to just cover them up with the sawdust and add a bit of wood chip on top. When I compare this, it will just give me an idea of how they grow. This isn't quite the same as growing it in the dirt in the ground, and I've done soil tests on this sawdust that's spread out around here, and I know that while it's high in phosphorus, it's low in both nitrogen and potassium. So I've added a bit of sulfate of potash here as well, and the gypsum for calcium, the sheep manure, and I've also the sheep pellets, sorry. I also, before I did the trenches, dug in a bit of the rotted sheep manure and some lawn clippings for that extra nitrogen, as I know that this ground is low in it anyway. And then we'll see how these ones go. I also have been thinking about wood chip. Some of you may have seen the Back to Eden videos and things like that, and about how great woodchip is to grow in. Well, in thinking about the cost of doing these barrels with lots of compost, I was thinking, well, what if woodchip would be just as good without the compost? So I decided to do one barrel. In this one, I've put woodchip in the bottom, about 4 inches. Into that I've mixed the same things as in the other barrel. I've mixed some grass clippings, some sulphate of potash, some milk powder, some ground up eggshells, some rock solid, and I stirred all those in. There's no vermicast and there's no blood. And then I've added a bit more woodchip and laid out 6 seed potatoes. There's one of each of the 5 varieties I'm growing, plus one extra of the Jersey bennies, because I've got a few extras of those. And what I'm going to do with this is compare the return on average of this compared to the average return of the 5 different varieties done in the barrels with the compost and so forth, just to give me an idea of which one actually yields the best returns. So I'm going to be covering up these with some more woodchip before I water it. I'm going to be laying out more trenches and more seed potatoes in here, and of course along the way always weighing exactly what is going in to each area so I can compare the weight of planting with the weight of... So it turns out after planting all the other potatoes, I've got 2 little rocket seed potatoes left weighing 66 grams. And what shall I do with these? Well, I've decided that I'm going to be a little more ordinary with these. I'm going to use a plant pot. I reckon this is probably about a 15 to 20 litre, 15 litre maybe. In it I'm going to use just really ordinary potting mix and some tui potato food that promises a bumper crop every time. It'll be interesting to see how it compares to our other growing methods. The dosage rate for this is 300 grams per square metre, so I reckon that's probably about 1/4 of a metre. So I'll put 75 grams of it mixed into a few inches of potting mix in the bottom, sit the seed potatoes on top, cover them with another few inches of potting mix. And I'm going to put them out in the same location as all the other potatoes, for the reason that I want them to be experiencing the same weather conditions, which gives a more reasonable comparison. So I'm going to go ahead and get this one set up. This is what 75 grams of potato food looks like. It's not a huge amount. So I'm putting that in here. Giving it a good mix. Our seed potatoes in, and now I will just need to cover that up with some more potting mix. Now I've showed you 3 other ways I'm going to be growing potatoes as a trial this time. We can have a look at the potential costs for those. Of course there are again more ways you could grow them, lots of different ideas to think of, but for my ones a garden bed is working out pretty cheap at 64 cents a kilo. All of these estimates are done on a 10-to-1 return. Less of a return will of course mean a greater cost per kilo. The barrel full of woodchip works out at about 81 cents a kilo, and the planter pot quite expensive at $4.15 a kilo. Well, this will give you some ideas of the various ways of doing it and the costs involved. It always pays to do a little bit of math before you make a decision about how to do your own growing. So here we have the final setup of the potato growing experiment. We've got our 10 barrels, our 4 planter bags just sitting in between the tyres here. We've also got a plant pot, a garden bed and a barrel just with woodchip in it. So time will tell how these turn out and which one produces the best results. There will be more videos to come. See you next time.